Hasn't done anything to quell the anger of those who've been out in the streets, the protesters, the strikers and the unions. And what we've seen since yesterday is the opposite, I think, of what Emmanuel Macron was hoping for, which is people understanding why he was pushing through this pension reform. It's been completely the opposite, with people saying, well, look, this president doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't understand what we want, doesn't understand the demands of the protesters. The unions, which are all united in this, have come out and said, I'll give you some quotes if you like. Laurent Berger of the CFDT union, it's a series of denial and lies by the president, saying that no one had come up with an alternative plan. Yes, the CFDT has come up with an alternative plan. What the government has done is to ignore it. Philippe Martinez of the CGT saying Macron is on the moon and shows contempt for the millions who are protesting. So the question now is, what will happen next? Will the president just stay put and carry on saying, I'm not going to budge on this. This reform has gone through. I'm not going to withdraw it. You're just going to have to live with it. Or will eventually, after more protests carry on, which appears to be the case, the president will have to do some kind of U-turn or sack his Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, or hold a referendum. Referendums don't work too well in France on what the public wants and what kind of pension reform should eventually go through. The problem is that at the moment, the unions won't move because they are united and they have a day of strikes today. So there's no way they're going to go in the way of the president and say, OK, let's discuss something. The president has offered to meet with the unions yesterday in this television interview, but I don't think there's much scope of that happening right now. That might be opening the door to some kind of compromise deal later down the line. But while these strikes, these recurring days of strikes, it's the 9th one today, keep coming, then I don't think there's much chance the unions are going to be getting around the table with President Macron.
Speaking of the trade unions, then, somewhat unusually, they've remained very united since this campaign began. Talk to us about a couple of them. What are the main differences between them?
Well, there are several unions in France, and it is quite rare that the unions are united in their approach to fighting against the government and what the government wants to do. And I think one of the mistakes the government has made, there have been several as far as this pension reform is concerned, is assuming that the unions will be divided and that will make the government stronger. The unions have been united all the way through this, but there are two, you're right, two main ones. One is the CFDT, which is the Confédération Française Démocratique du Travail, which basically is a union which is more ready to seek a compromise deal. It's a reformist union that can often work out a solution when it comes to strike movements with the government and sign some kind of protocol agreement. Then you have on the other side the CGT union, the Confédération Générale de Travail, which is a much more confrontational union, which usually doesn't want to find a solution and will carry on striking until it gets what it wants. These two have fallen out numerous times in the past. There have even been reports back during a last pension reform in 2020 of CGT members breaking in and cutting off the electricity at the CFDT. So over the past 100 years since these two unions have existed, there have been several occasions when they didn't get on. They're getting on this time round for the time being because they're united in this fight against this pension reform. They both have the same amount of members, around 600 to 650,000 across France. But those members are fewer than they used to be, for example, back in 1995 during a major wave of protest strikes in which the government did end up doing a U-turn. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to play out. But for the moment, not much sign of either side wanting to budge or move the lines as far as this pension reform is concerned.